Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day. Visit CoolStuffInc.com and use the promo code MAGICMics to save 5% off anything in the store, singles, sealed supplies, whatever you want. Get 5% off by using the promo code MAGICMics. And check out our co-sponsor Mana Traders, the best tool to enhance your Magic Online experience. Use the code MAGICMics_IQJ. Again, that's IQJ for 10% off your next subscription with Mana Traders. Tell them we sent you. We appreciate it. My name is Evan Irwin. We get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Power Dragon.
What's up, everybody? And man, I am starting to get wore out already on Duskmourn. There is a lot to cover.
There's a lot. Ruben Bressler.
Spooky season is here. I mean, you better not get worn out before tomorrow. It's time for the early access.
Oh no, I'll be dead at the end of tomorrow.
Time to throw down. Yeah. I am also going to be exhausted tomorrow.
I see. Well, we also begin with our choice of the top comment from our last top 10 in the segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who is the most eloquent, letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 Bloomborough cards. Ruben?
I will be exhausted tomorrow because I have a class at like 8:30 in the morning. So we had some great comments on our last video. Thank you guys so much for commenting on the Bloomborough video. Keep those comments coming below. We want to see your dissertation on why we're dumb and didn't choose the right card for this list. Eighth place Dave was nicer about it, of course, but he is the winner this week. My number one card for this set is an uncommon Parting Gust. It's 2 mana instant speed exile and also a 2 mana essence flux all in one card. Sure, your opponent gets a 1/1 tapped fish if you want to exile their creature, but that's okay because it's a 1/1 tapped fish. You can use it to save your own creature and a +1/+1 counter to a creature. Reuse and enter the battlefield effect. The card is just incredibly flexible. The main downside is that it costs WW, aka 2 white mana, and not a colorless and a white.
Yeah, Parting Gust is 2 white for a uncommon instant that says gift a tapped fish. You may promise an opponent a gift as you cast the spell. If you do, create a tapped 1/1 blue fish creature token before its other effects. You exile target non-token creature. If the gift wasn't promised, return that creature to the battlefield under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it at the beginning of the next end step. So it's interesting in that, obviously, you can help save your stuff, you can try to get rid of their stuff, but in a multiplayer game, this becomes a political tool, basically, for ways to manipulate the board and have them your friends get bonuses and you get not attacked or whatever.
Yeah, it's just a really good spin on the whole blink effect, right? Like, it allows you some trickery on your side for any ETB stuff, but, like you're saying, it could also work for helping somebody else out. Or sometimes you just want to stop your opponent from putting something on a card. Like I've seen that. Or you need to reset some tokens on a thing or whatever. So it's a pretty flexible little card.
Yeah. It's also incredibly fun and interesting now. Every once in a while, I'll see CEDH content pop up on my TikTok. And the amount of gift a tapped fish that I've seen is kind of staggering. It's one of the most impactful keywords, individual keywords I've seen in a long time. Into the Flood Maw being a key piece of being able to go and combo off, this card being able to take out a Hate Bear, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've played many of Into the Flood Maw, and it is fantastic. And we're going to go ahead and, first of all, appreciate them for being a part of the show. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, 8th place Dave, for being a part of it. Stay tuned for our top 10 list and let us know what
you got to be able to close out them tournaments, Dave.
Yeah. Let us know what your choice of the honorable mention may be this week. Also, pop in that like. Just hit that like button. Just pam, potato, like. Move on. Let's start with our top 10 Duskmourn cards. We have a same at number 10 for Ruben and I. So we'll cover that in just a second. So Power Dragon, what is your number 10?
This is, I don't know. I guess we just had another elf card got previewed a couple sets ago. So elves are eating good this year. But we get Tyvar the Pummeler.
Ooh.
A colorless green for a 3/3 legendary elf warrior. So 2 good creature types if you're playing some commander. But the cool part is you can tap another untapped creature you control, and this gets indestructible to end of turn. You do have to tap it, but who cares? And then you can pay 3 colorless green and get an overrun, sort of. Your creatures get +X to end of turn, where X is the greatest power among your creatures. Man, there's just a lot you can do with this card. Like one, it's redundancy for elf decks, which already can generate a bunch of mana. So it's another way you can pump and get your team across the finish line.
Mhm.
You don't even have to use the ability as a sorcery, which is super nice. So you can use it multiple times in combat after they block or after something sneaks through. Just making it indestructible is great. We have other cards even in the set that we want to tap just to get the ability up. So like just being able to tap things freely for no downside is big. Like this checks a lot of boxes for a lot of different things.
Yeah. I think that even if didn't have the ability and it just said you can tap creatures you control if you want to, this card would see play because of the new survivor mechanic that is in this set. This is a survivor outlet in and of itself. Oh, by the way, it survives removal and survives wraths and things like that. And on top of that, it does have that overwhelming stampede effect. The same cost, 3 generic green gets you the same effect. Plus X, where X is the greatest power. Harkens back to Azuri Renegade Leader, which did have actual overrun for its actual cost, 2 generic green. This is even better, and it's a 3/3 for 3 to begin with. This thing is priced to move. Everything about this card is spectacular.
Yeah, I do think my favorite part is that you can activate that second ability as much as you want. You're in green, you're making 12 million mana. What are you going to do with it? Well, all right, let's pump our team over and over and over and over and over again and just kill you plus because it's great. For our number 10, I'll take a stab at describing it. Particularly if there has been one card that I have seen over and over and like, oh my god, you're going to win on turn 2 in standard. It is this one. This is the card that even in the older formats, they just kind of go on and on about like what this is one of those cards that when you hear X happens on turn Y, it might be in the mix because it's a ley line, and ley lines can enter for free. And when they enter for free, they have their super cool abilities, and your opponent is swimming around in their little dish and are never going to target any of your stuff or stop anything you do. But this card will enable all those Mondo combos. And Ruben, what is it?
Yeah, so all of the ley lines are like medium playable. This one is at my number 10 because it's fine, except that it does enable that turn 2 combo because it's Layline of Resonance. 2 generic red rare enchantment. It's the red one of the cycle. If Layline of Residence is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets only a single creature you control, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. So there are a number of ways to win on turn 2 with this card. The most notable one is with Valiant Mouse, the Valiant Mouse. I forget what it is.
Right.
But you play the mouse that gets a +1/+1 counter on it on turn 1 with your Layline of Residence, and then on turn 2 you can either target it with something like a Monstrous Rage, which gives the creature +2/+0 and a Monstrous Roll token, getting 2 copies of that. Some other, Titan Strength style effect, give it like +3 power, turning that into a +6 power, and then either giving that double strike with a 1-mana double strike enabler, or throwing it at your opponent with a thud effect. I believe Callous Sellsword is still in standard as well. So there's a couple of ways to be able to finagle that.
The old Heartfire Hero.
Yes, Heartfire Hero. That's the card.
Yeah, I feel like that's going to be one of the things a lot of people attempt early on because it's fun, right? Just see if you can do it. Try to see if you can go off turn 2.
Right.
I think the card is good. I don't even know if that's its best use.
Right.
And that's weird to say. I feel like that's what we're all focused on because people are like, oh, we can do this thing on turn 2. But I feel like it'll eventually find a home somewhere else. Probably blue base, copying a bunch of card drawing things, whatever, who knows what. But there's got to be something else to do with this because I feel like while you can do that, the red decks are already fast, right? How much are we adding? A half turn, maybe every 5th game or whatever. Is it worth it? It might be, just for that one extra, could be. So we'll see. But I think it's a sweet card. I think it's a really neat ability. Being able to copy stuff is pretty cool, but I think we're going to find something better for it, and we don't even know what it is yet.
I don't think it's so much that it's turn 2. I think it's that you can't ever let your shields go down. if this exists on the battlefield and they have a Heartfire
Yeah.
hero or whatever, something dumb, because if you put the shields down, something dumb is really going to happen.
See, I feel like I already feel that way against mono red anyway, so this doesn't even change
Sure.
anything for me.
I mean, mono red kill everything on sight, basically.
Right.
Kill
Yeah,
everything if you
exactly.
can.
Yeah.
Don't
But
take
it just turns your deck into infect, where every creature has to be
Yeah.
killed
Right.
on sight. The other good thing about this card is that they stack. About half of the ley lines are not good in multiples. Layline of the Void is not good in multiples. The green one in this set is not good in multiples. This one can stack, and that is relevant, giving a third copy, just in case you have extras in your opening hand.
It's horrible, by the way. That's horrific. I don't like that. I don't appreciate that. I don't see that.
Well, take it up with the judge.
I can't handle it. I don't like it. Now let's move on here to number 9. Power Dragon, what's your number 9?
My number 9 is the only room I think that made my list, but it's Funeral Room, Awakening Hall. Funeral Room is 2 colorless and a black. Whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life, you gain a life. And that's the main reason I think this card will see play. We'll call it the aristocrat type decks, you know, the things that are making tokens when I sacrifice stuff, the LSL core, gain life. When stuff dies, your opponent lose life. Those decks seem like they've been looking for one more piece, and they haven't really had a Bastion of Remembrance or anything like that in a while. And this fills that spot very well, right? There's a lot of cards right now between Urbrass Forge, whatever the black-red creature is that makes the 2/1 that sacks and dies at the end of every turn, right? Like, all that stuff is like right on the edge of being playable, but it needed another consistent piece, and this gives that deck a little bit of redundancy. Now, the other side, Awakening Hall, it's 8 mana, so 6 colorless black, which is a ton. But then you return everything from the graveyard, back into play. So you get all those creatures back, which is nutso. So how often will you actually use Awakening Hall? Probably not that often. But at the same time, we said we weren't going to be casting, the actual enchantment side of Virtue of Persistence very often either, and that comes up quite a lot. So that's 7 mana, so who the hell knows? Like, maybe it's a thing that can happen. But I think Funeral Room is going to help out a few decks that were right on the cusp, or even be a potential finisher for something like token-based decks or the mono, or what's been the Boros aggro, but you could splash with a bunch of different lands. Like, that just needs a little bit of finishing action. This could probably be the card.
Yeah. I'm so glad you had this on your list, because it was very close to my list. That the left side is all you need. The right side is just gravy. So if you're interested in the left side as an ability, you just put it in your deck, and then you just so happen to have an 8 mana end the game card on the right. There's a couple of cards that are like that, where it's like, I would just play one of the sides as a card by itself. I don't need the rest of this card, but I have it. Not to mention the fact that you have cards like Ghostly Dancer in this set that can unlock rooms at a discount and get that 8 mana effect for free.
Hold me closer,
at a discount.
Ghostly Dancer. Look, man, look, one thing, the Virtue of Persistence thing, 7 mana and 8 mana is a divide. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
There's something about, you can get to 7 mana and Natali and all this other stuff, but like, to get to 8 is sometimes a lot. And
It's harder, for sure.
it's way, way more difficult. And B, honestly, I think I'd rather have the Virtue. I don't know. This is sort of the one shot, everything shows up all at once. It also it only affects your graveyard, not their graveyard, where Persistence, you could get any of their stuff. Persistence is great early and late. This is cool early, but it also, you have to activate that left side of the room. Like,
Oh, yeah. I'm looking at it.
Right.
Kind of more like Ruben was saying, where you're playing it almost as a Bastion of Remembrance, right? Like, you're just playing it for that ability.
Right.
And then if once every 8 or 9 games you get the other side, awesome.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about some synergies with that stuff here in a bit. But Ruben, what is your number 9?
My number 9, to me, feels like maybe the best rare for limited I've seen at least in a real long time. But like, I can't imagine ever beating this card in limited. And historically, when a card is just so solid in limited that it like can't ever be beaten, it makes its way into constructed. And so I feel like I'm confident that Valgavoth's Onslaught is going to be the world's biggest beating in limited that anyone has ever seen. So it's gotta break through to constructed, kinda, right? Maybe? XX green for a rare sorcery says manifest dread X times, then put X +1/+1 counters on each of those creatures. So let's do a little bit of math. At 3 mana, you get a 3/3. Nothing to write home about. You do also put 1 extra card in your graveyard, and a creature is now face down in play, maybe. Whatever. For 5 mana, you get 2 4/4s. Right?
No,
you
get
manifest
2
dread
3/3s.
twice, and you put 2 +1/+1 counters on each of those creatures.
Yep.
Oh,
you get 2 4/4s.
Yep.
And then for 7 mana, you get 3 5/5s. Like, how is anyone ever beating this card in limited?
I don't like how that scaled. I don't like what you just said there. What in the hell?
Yep. Yep.
The
Evan's face was what I did in my head the first time I read this card.
That's not.
And the wild thing is, you can still turn some of those face up as their creatures potentially
with counters on them now to kill you with and do stupid things.
So at 3 mana, it's fine. It's not spectacular. At 5 mana, it's spectacular. At 7 mana, it's spectacular.
Yeah, at 7 mana, you're probably winning that game, or they've got a Wrath waiting for you. Because Jesus,
I mean, realistically, even in constructed, this is reasonable, right? Like your opponent sweeps the board, and you're like, okay, next turn, I guess I'll pay 5 and get 2 4/4s.
I mean, I play mono green in the Explorer formats, even timeless formats. You just want stuff that can go stupid high in terms of I make 1 million green mana by turn 5 or whatever. Like, give me something to X = 7 or whatever, and I just go completely haywire. Like, it's doable. It's possible. And that would be insane.
There's enough mana doublers in Commander that this is going to be relevant as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is already pre-ordering for a few bucks to $5 for the cool version, and we can see why. Hurts nuts. Moving on here to my number 9, which I think is rad. It's one of those cards where everyone's like, there's a 2-card combo at standard and everything's going to die. And it's like, there's been plenty of 2-card combos, particularly ones where you have to like deal combat damage to a player, which is a whole other thing that's difficult to do to start with. And so for my number 9, I like it in that it's exciting and cool. I like the fact that it's a really cool trope that they're, homaging in the set, because when you have an unstoppable slasher, it's just not going to stop. It doesn't care. It's never going to stop. An unstoppable slasher here is a black and 2 generic mana for a 2/3 rare zombie assassin with Death Touch. And when it deals combat damage to a player, they lose half their life rounded up, which is a big deal because Aklazotz, I think is how you say it, doubles the life loss or whatever. And so boom, you killed them in one go. Congratulations. And it's even a 3 mana to 4 mana play and stuff, which is cool.
That's pretty cool.
The rest of it is when it dies, if it had no counters on it, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control with 2 stun counters on it, because you can't stop the unstoppable slasher. And I think that is rad. I love it. I like the idea and the trope that it's sort of, homaging again, but again, 2-card combos in standard they're not scary. I'm sorry. They're just not when they're creatures. Not when they're creatures.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing I will say is this gives some version of either lose half your life or when you take damage, lose life, whatever. Like this set, I think, gives us the 3rd and 4th card to kind of make that a possible deck if people want to do it. I mean, you'll have options, right? And you can still build around that. But also, this card has 2 fairly decent creature types in being a zombie, and the assassins were on the cusp of being played with Atrata out of Karlov Manor,
right?
And it's been short, needing 1 or 2 assassins, and it might fill in that gap as well. So yeah, this card I think is always going to have some type of value just being a zombie in and of itself. But it is a 2/3. It has Death Touch, so it could even block stuff all day and come back. Like it's got a lot of stuff going for it, even if you ignore the lose half your life ability.
Yeah. 2 generic and a black is a very exciting mana cost, not just for Llanowar Elves, which is going to be in standard for the foreseeable future, but also Dark Ritual, maybe, someday in older formats. And this is just a very exciting card. I mean, when I read this card, I'm like, how do I get rid of the counters? I don't need to get rid of the counters. The card's just good by itself.
It's going to be just fine. Now, We spoke a minute ago about Funeral Room and Awakening Hall from Power Dragons number 9. And my number 8 is perfect right alongside with that card. And it is pre-ordering for some high dollars for just being a rare. As I understand it, the Commander players are all about this. And that card is Enduring Tenacity. Enduring Tenacity is 2 black, 2 generic mana for a rare enchantment creature Snake Glimmer. It is a 4/3 that says whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. And when it dies, if it was a creature returning to the battlefield under its owner's control, it is an enchantment, not a creature any longer. So you be draining, and you be gaining, and they be losing, and people lose the game pretty fast when you start gaining life and they start losing that same amount.
Yeah, this was easily going to be popular among the Commander crowd. Like, people love life gain, life drain stuff. You know, like we said, even then, it could still be part of the deck we were discussing earlier. Like, it's a perfect card to go in there. And all these enduring cards, when they die, you don't even care, right? Like, they're still going to get to do what they do. So, like, you can run this out knowing that removal's coming or sweeper's coming. You're like, yeah, whatever. It dies. I'm still getting the abilities I want the rest of the way.
Yeah. I mean, it's also, it's reasonably statted. I'm not upset with a 4/3. It combos real well. It's already the creature it's basically redundancy. That's the word I'm looking for.
Right.
In combo decks that already exist in Commander, and just a good solid body to boot.
Yeah, I think it's got 3 toughness for a reason. Easy to exile in that way. Sanguine Bond has been a staple in Commander forever. This is a cheaper version that even if they kill it, you still get it, which I think is great. And yeah, just very exciting card for those people who like that stuff. Ruben, what's number 8?
My number 8 is a card that I think it's pretty exciting. I again, when I'm looking at the rooms in particular, I'm looking for one of the halves to be a card that I just want to cast, like by itself, that I just want in play already. And if it's like slightly below rate, I'm kind of okay with that. But if I get both halves that I want to cast, and they're both effects that I want, and they're on the same card, I'm definitely in the market. And the card that I think does that the best and doesn't need anything else to help it, it's just a good card on its own, is Unholy Annex and Ritual Chamber. Unholy Annex is 2 generic and a black, and Ritual Chamber is 3 generic black. Unholy Annex says at the beginning of your end step, draw a card. If you control a demon, each opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. Otherwise, you lose 2 life. And then Ritual Chamber says when you unlock this door, you make a 6/6 demon creature token with flying. So I'm in the market for a 5 mana 6/6 flyer. That's fine. That's like an okay rate. I'm good with that. Unholy Annex is not going to be difficult to trigger, and especially in this set. And if I lose 2 life to draw a card, I lose 2 life to draw a card. I've certainly paid 2 life to draw a card in my life. So I'm happy with both halves of this card. Probably lives in like a mid-range control deck, either blue-black or black-green or black-blue. But I think this card's fine. I think this card's just real solid.
Yeah, I think, kind of like you were saying, this is a case where both sides are reasonable, right? Even if you just top deck it and you're like, well, like, F it, I'll just pay 5 and get a 6/6, right? A 6/6 flyer at that, right? So it's not going to be terrible at either stage of the game to give you either part. And then after the fact, you can go ahead, cast something else, pay your 3, and then now we're drawing cards during our end step or whatever. So, like, yeah, there's a lot going on with this card that I actually really like. I think both these sides could end up being played for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, it's rad. Like, there's not a ton of Phyrexian Arena type effects on enchantments, let alone, this is an easier to cast version, but you'd lose twice as much life. But sometimes that doesn't always matter, particularly if you're gaining a bunch of life anyway. Once you get the other side going, it doesn't matter anyway. At that point, hell, they lose to you, like, 4 life point swing every turn all of a sudden instead of you losing life. That's nuts. I'll take that. Either side of this is cool. Like, this is one of those, like, just really nicely costed cards, rather. Like, 3 mana, the fact that it's a black and 2 generic and not 2 black and a generic, like, it's 5 mana, which is right there at the cusp of being worth a 6/6 flyer. Fantastic stuff. Power Dragon, what's number 8?
I don't think we could have planned this, but all of our number 8s had to do with life gain, life loss in some variety, which is hilarious. But I got Layline of Hope.
Ooh.
2 colorless, white, if you actually decide to cast it. Otherwise, if in your opening hand, you get it for free. And then if you would gain life, you gain that much +1. But if you have at least 7 more life than your starting total, all your stuff gets +2/+2. This, to me, is very reminiscent of the Angel, the 2/4 from Kaldheim. I think
Righteous
it was.
Valkyrie.
Yeah. And that got played. Now, admittedly, that's on a creature. But, in this day and age, creatures are pretty easy to deal with. So having it on an enchantment's pretty sweet. I've played a couple of decks even recently in Standard and Best One that are just gaining incidental life for different things. A bunch of First Strikers like Bright Blade Stoat, things like that will trigger for extra life now. There's even a Knight that already does this same thing, that when you gain life, you gain one. So now you're getting an extra one. So it's not going to be very difficult to get to that extra +2. And we've actually even seen that bats are able to do this pretty regularly as well.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a few different decks that might want this, and this could lead to some games ending very quickly.
I was about to say that bats are eating good in this set for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Angels deck is already fantastic and Explore
Yep.
the Life Gain Soul Warden deck. And having this out there when I play my Soul Warden and everything just starts going haywire is, good, clean living. I can see myself running 2, maybe 4, the whole boat to see if I can get it out there, because more of those Angels that give +2/+2 everything is awesome. And now it's on an enchantment. It's even hard to get rid of. So
it also has 2 other things going for it. Is one, it's not that hard to cast at 4 mana. And 2, you don't care if you have multiples of this.
Right. That too.
It is one of the stackables.
I don't know that I prefer my creature-based effects to be on creatures, right? So the fact that Righteous Valkyrie is itself a creature, meaning that they trigger future versions of themselves, they pump future versions of themselves. To me, that's a benefit as opposed to a downside to being swept up in removal.
Oh, sure.
But it is just more of this effect. And if any deck is in the market to have the same effect repeated over and over again, it's the Soul Sisters Gain Life deck, which is nothing but the same effect on every card that can possibly get those effects. So I foresee that this will find a home probably in a more life gain centric as opposed to the Righteous Valkyrie Angel centric build. But, if
if it
there's
works,
room for both.
If it works, it works.
Yeah.
And I'll take that. Let's move over to number 7. My number 7 is a card that I love the design of. I think they pushed it in the right ways. I think it reads really well. It's worth plenty right now in pre-ordering, which is great. And it's also a quintessential horror movie moment when you split up the party and you go, you sure you want to do that? And you do with Split Up. For 2 white and a generic mana, it is a rare sorcery that says choose one, destroy all tapped creatures or destroy all untapped creatures. Beautiful, succinct, easy to understand, works great with a survivor mechanic, can wreck your opponent, can 1-for-1 if you have to, or can just stop their crazy assault by just getting rid of all of their tapped guys that they just attack with, and then you have your army right there waiting, and then they all die, and then you get in there, and that's fantastic. This card's great.
Great card. I hate it.
Yeah. This card is insane. This card was probably literally my number 11. This was my last cut from my top 10. Being able to go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop is usually the best thing that you can be doing, especially at the start of a format. So the existence of Split Up by itself means that you've got to have it on your mind. A 3-mana Wrath. Not to mention the fact that creatures tap for other effects, tap for mana, try to be survivors, all that kind of stuff. So Split Up is, absolutely bananas.
Yeah, the interesting thing too for me is trying to figure out where this goes, right? Do decks want to just play 2 of them just as incidental? If I draw them early enough, fine. Late game, I still pick off the 1 or 2 creatures I want. Cool. Is it supplementing other sweepers? Are you playing it in more aggro-y, mid-rangey things, I guess, to where you can control which ones are dying or not dying, and who knows where this card's going to show up? It's too good to not get played. I just don't know exactly what deck and how many want it yet.
It's interesting. It almost feels like a really great sideboard card. Obviously it's really aggressive decks. But if you're playing with survivors and want survivor effects, and they're playing with survivor and want survivor effects, this is the breaker of that mirror oh, I got split up and you don't. So I'll kill all of your guys and your survivors. Now all my guys are going to attack and get all the survivor abilities and stuff. Like, really cool. The fact that it just destroys creatures and doesn't exile them means that kind of tones down the power level a little bit. It's just one of the best designs of the set.
Oh, there's some situations where you might just be playing some mid-rangey Orzhov thing where you're like, all right, well, you've attacked last turn. I'm just going to go ahead and cast this. You lose 2 or 3 bodies. And now I get to attack and you have maybe 1 dude back or whatever.
Right.
Like that's a real situation that's going to come up for some people.
And I'm okay with that. I think they did a fantastic job with the flavor, the top down, the way it feels, the way it's going to play. Just a wonderful card. All right, Ruben, what's number 7?
My number 7 is one of kind of a lot of 2-mana 2/3s in this set. I don't know if you guys noticed this going through the spoiler, but there's a large number of 2-mana 2/3s.
And they're not even dual color on some of them, which is kind of
exactly.
surprising.
I had to cut it down to not put every 2-mana 2/3 in my top 10. But especially because this one's a looter, I had to put this one on my list. And I am always going to be in the market for an Oblivious Bookworm. Oblivious Bookworm is a green and a blue for a 2/3 human wizard. Let's just stop to appreciate that for a second. 2-mana 2/3, 2 relevant creature types. We love that.
Love it.
But we're not done. At the beginning of your end step, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card unless a permanent entered the battlefield face down under your control this turn, or you turned a permanent face up this turn. Good heavens. That's good. That's good value. I mean, I'm happy to just loot. Adam Prozac famously said, I'd rather draw a card and discard a card than just draw a card. If you're trying to get to Delirium, if you're trying to fuel graveyard effects, there's a lot of reasons to want to use the graveyard as a resource. This one is also very easy to not have to loot and keep that extra card in your hand. On turn 3, you just play your Morph, or you play your Shroud guy, or Disguise guy, or you play a Manifested Dread something or other. There's a million ways to just draw a card with this guy. And it tangles really good with other Manifested Dread creatures with that 3 toughness on a 2/2. It's just like, it's the perfect card. This is like my invitational card.
No, I like it. I can tell you right now, I already have a deck list ready to play in the streamer event that's got this in there. And to your point, like, it does fuel a couple of different deck types, right? If you just want to play it in the face down deck, fine, right? Totally reasonable card. You need something early, this fills that spot. If you want to just draw cards, it's doing that if you have triggers. If you're trying to fill the graveyard for some type of delirium situation, it's doing that, right? So it can go a lot of different ways and still just be a reasonable body, letting you see cards every turn, right? Like, it's just draw a card every turn at the very least.
Well, right, and it's fueling delirium. It's getting stuff in your graveyard. I've got a Soul Tie graveyard deck already, Souls of the Lost, and all that, and that Lurgoyf thing that you can kick and stuff. Like, all of that, this just fits right in there. I love the stat line. I think we have to get kind of used to the fact that 2-mana 2/3 is kind of where we're at in terms of the power.
Our
level.
new normal.
Yeah, that's our new normal stat line. And just like 1-mana 2/1s. They're just kind of our new stat line. And if they're less than 1-mana 2/1s, they got to do something pretty rad to make up for that. But I think
they're like 1/1s with haste and happen to be an artifact or something.
Right. Like, then all these boxes got ticked all of a sudden. Power Dragon, what's number 7?
My number 7 is actually higher on somebody's list, and I have a rough idea who it might be, but that is what my number 7 is.
All right, let's move along here in that case to our number 6 rather, and that's it. Ruben, what's number 6?
My number 6, I mean, it's kind of an obvious one. This was literally the first card I put on my list, just because it was pretty obvious to me that it's going to be a player in Standard. You're going to want your 4-of copy, because an eerie aggro deck is going to be playable. They printed too many good cards with it. The last time they printed this exact card, but in another color, it was very playable. And the last time they printed that card, it was named Generous Visitor. This time around, it's named Optimistic Scavenger. Optimistic Scavenger is a 1-mana 1/1 human scout. For 1 white mana, uncommon, it has Eerie. Whenever an enchantment you control enters, and whenever you fully unlock a room, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. This is going to see play. I don't know what else to tell you. There's too many 1/1 glimmers. There's too many enchantment creatures out there. They got ethereal armor in this set. This thing is going to be able to beat down. This thing is going to be able to spread the love around, keep things big, all for the low cost of 1 mana.
Yeah, I got nothing negative to say in any way, shape, or form about this type of card. I mean, it's a 1/1 straight up that's probably going to trigger at least every other turn at the bare minimum, even if you have quirky draws, but probably every turn because we have so many cards in the set that happen to also be enchantments. So you can build around that pretty easily. And like you said, having a bunch of good 1 and 2 costs, or as we can just put on creatures now from this set, like you can kind of go nuts. And there's several that we weren't playing from the past couple of sets because we didn't have a good reason to.
Like if we want to talk about like, our nut draws or whatever, like optimistic scavenger, and then untap optimistic scavenger, enchantment land, hexproof enchantment land.
Ooh.
Make one of them a 3/3, get you. Like that is a thing we can do, and it would be
pretty fun.
Lots and lots of fun. Now my 6 is higher on somebody else's list, but that's okay. Power Dragon, what's your number 6?
My number 6 is one of those enchantment creatures, actually, as it turns out, but Fear of Missing Out.
Ooh.
Colorless and a red for a 2/3 enchantment nightmare. When it enters, you can discard a card, then draw a card, which helps you fuel Delirium, which it also has. And then if you do meet Delirium, when you attack, you can untap a creature and you get an extra attack step. This card's going to be silly. I've already been thinking about all the different things we could do with this. Like, again, it's a 2/3 for 2. Very easy to cast since it only has 1 colored mana in the cost. It's helping fuel itself get to Delirium. Like, there's crazy things you can untap. Like, I was already thinking building decks with this and the Dragonhawk. Because, I get to trigger it, and then I get to attack and trigger it again and just kill your opponent on sight, basically. Like, there's some dumb things you can do with this card. Now, admittedly, you only get to untap 1 creature, but getting a whole other attack step, if it's the right creature, that's all you need. And this fits into aggro builds. This fits into enchantment stuff. It fits into Delirium decks. Like, I'm almost mad that I'm thinking about this card already for so many different decks I'm trying to put together, just because it just slides into a lot of things without a downside. Like, this card's nuts.
Yeah. Speaking of 2 mana 2/3s, this is the one I had to not put in my list because I knew someone was going to talk about it. This card's insane. I think it's going to be a little difficult to get Delirium immediately, but you also don't need Delirium immediately with this card. It's a 2/3 that gives you immediate come into play ability. Then when your opponent kills it, because it's such a big body on turn 2, you're halfway to Delirium for your next Fear of Missing Out. Oh, by the way, you could discard 1 copy to another copy of itself to get halfway there also. It's going to be real easy to get Delirium. Like, it's possible to get Delirium on turn 3 and attack with this creature. Because you can go turn 2, play this, discard another enchantment creature. Turn 3, play a Terramorphic Expanse and burn your opponent's creature with an instant or sorcery. Like, that's all you need to do, and we're already off to the races.
Yeah, I'm very glad you included this. This was the actual last card I replaced in my top 10. It was right there. I have a different one, which is actually my number 6, but we'll talk about later. But yeah, the fact that this is so easily triggered and the fact that, it gives you so many different ways to play. If you're able to get it going on turn 3, that's a 2 mana 4/3 basically. And I also love how it just scales throughout the game. The longer the game goes on, the better this card gets and the scarier each one of your creatures gets, which I think is just fantastic.
It also triggers Valiant, for those of you who are interested in that.
It does.
Oh, it does. That's also annoying.
Like, you mean awesome?
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds great. All right. So let's go ahead and get to number 5 here. And my number 5, as you do, and as you do cheat with some of these things, is a whole cycle. And to me, it is the Verge Land cycle, which are all fantastic and noteworthy and crazy pushed. Like, look at Blazemire Verge. This is the black-red version. And again, they can make 20 of these to flip-flop the mana symbols around and whatnot. But it is a rare land that taps for a black mana. No downside. Just taps for a black mana. Comes into play untapped. And you can tap to add a red if you but you can only activate only if you control a swamp or a mountain. Gosh, I wonder if you play swamps or mountains in the black-red decks that would want 1 black mana on turn 1 for Thoughtseize and other stuff. Like, Holy cow. So, arguably the best swamp ever made. We haven't been this close to better than a basic land since the flip lands from Zendikar Rising, I
Yep.
think.
Pathways.
Pathways, yeah, thank
Mhm.
you. And like, it just these things are nuts, you know. And if you're going to play on any constructed format, just craft them all. Just get them. If
Yeah.
you're on Magic Online, just buy your sets. You're going to use them forever. They've made these fantastic non-basic lands. Get your sets and enjoy them.
Yeah, there's no downside to these. Like even during early deck building with these, like if your deck plays 4 to 6 basics, just cut half your basics and stick these in there. Like, I mean, they're literally a basic plus. There is
Right.
no downside to these. Like, and then occasionally you will have one of those other basics and then whatever. But also don't forget, we have lands from Karlov Manor. The Surveil lands have 2 basic land types on them. So if you're willing to play those, well, now you have another thing that can turn these on to be dual lands. So like, yeah, I'm with you. This is the closest thing you have to just replacing a basic and getting upside. So yeah, and you don't even need to have a lot of basic. That's the thing. If you have just any number of basics in your deck, it's worth playing a couple of these.
Yeah. I mean, for most mana, almost every mana base, that is the case. The only niche that I can see as an issue is if your mana base is not 50-50 and your mana base skews heavily in the wrong direction. So, for example, which one did you say? The Blaze something?
Blaze
Meyer Verge. It's
Yeah.
So
base
if we have
black,
the black red one here,
right.
if you are a
If you're a Blaze red deck, don't play
red
this.
deck
Yeah.
that wants to splash black, this is not where we want to be.
But
Right?
I will say, if I'm playing 2 swamps, I'm cutting 1 swamp and playing one of these.
Okay.
I mean, the problem
because it's going to be a swamp all the time anyway. But sometimes
true.
it's also going to be red, right?
Right. And the fact that the Surveil lands turn this on as well is kind of silly. This to me is just like the greatest sideboard enabler ever.
Sure.
You can just, you know, as long as your base color is the color it's tapping for, throw in those red hate cards, you know, a couple Sulphurous Springs or whatever, and you're off to the races. You can splash whatever red removal you want.
It does encourage you to not play non-basic lands also, which I really like. I like that you're encouraged to not play Mana Confluence and every temple and, you know, all these 3-color lands that don't have the basic land types because the verges are pushing you back to
Now,
basics.
I will say I'll be curious to see how these play in older formats, if they make a break in anywhere, because there are still some other lands that have basic land types on them
Right.
that pop up from time to time that could make these more playable, but I don't know if that's the case yet. I'm not looked into it at all, but it'll be interesting.
I'm very excited to try these out in older formats. I think the black-red decks, again, the black-red decks always want Thoughtseize on turn 1, and like that's where you're at here. And if they can make black-red turn 2, high five, Blood Crypt, whatever, it doesn't matter. Anything's turning this on at that point, which is what makes it feel so crazy good. And with only, I think it's what, Sunspire Links is the only real non-basic hate right now that we have.
Sure.
That's it. That's my big worry. That's the number one thing I'm concerned about.
Yeah, and right now red decks aren't even built to worry about that. Like they don't even have the mana to cast it most of the time.
No one's gonna play that right now. Ruben, what's number 5?
My number 5, speaking of cycles, is one of a cycle. It is of the Overlord Cycle. I love all of these cards. I think that they're all great. They're all worthy of being mythics. To me, the one that I know for certain in my heart and in my mind is the most similar to a card that has had success in the past is probably Overlord of the Boiler Bilges. So that's going to be my pick here. Overlord of the Boiler Bilges is the red avatar horror enchantment creature. 4 generic red gets you a 5/5 with impending of 2 generic red, which says that you can effectively put it into play, and then it will tick down, and then once you take the last counter off, it can attack and block. And whenever Overlord of the Boiler Bilges enters or attacks, it deals 4 damage to any target. Very similar, obviously, to Inferno Titan. The other Overlords, I think they're all playable. For my money, I think the Mistmoors might be the best one. I just don't know how in the market a white deck is going to be for a Grave Titan. just because white is better at creatures. But the red, this is obviously going to see play to me. 4 to your face, attacking every turn, getting rid of every blocker. I can't imagine this card not finding a home somewhere.
Now,
I feel like a lot of times we'll get cycles like this where there's always one or two that you go like, they got screwed. Nobody's going to play this one or whatever. Like, all 5 of these seem playable in some variety. Hell, the white one might even be the best reanimator target because you get 3 things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like these are really good. And I think the red one can find a home just being an extra removal card in some decks, like some mid-rangey Gruul ramp, smuggler surprise type deck. Like, okay, cool. Now you have another removal card that happens to also be a 5/5 and do a thing if you hit it on smuggler surprise, right?
Right.
And I think that's where this is going to find a home in a lot of different builds.
It's almost a door card where
Kind
you're
of.
like, I'll pay 4 mana for this door, and then later I'll just have a 5/5.
That also deals for.
It also deals for. You're muted, Evan.
Sorry, so let's be clear in terms of like the timing and what's happening here. So, and to be clear, impending 4 of 2 red, 2 generic mana. If you cast the spell with its impending cost, it enters with 4 time counters on it and is not a creature until the last is removed. And at the beginning of your end step, you remove a time counter from it. So this isn't the beginning of your upkeep, start of your end step, but you are casting it for that impending cost. So you are getting that 4 damage to any target for that 4 mana immediately. And then later, you're going to have a 5/5. Again, you don't get it sort of till they get a whole turn of it as, a 5/5 on your turn. But you still got the effect, and you're still probably killed something. And if you get to untap with this thing, God help everyone, because this is Inferno Titan ++ in many ways to deal 4 to something versus 3 split around. And that's very scary, and I like it. And I have an Overlord on my list, and that's how cool they are. We can have multiple Overlords on our list because it's great.
Yep.
So
yeah,
card is fan-freaking-tastic, and I love it. Power Dragon, what's number 5?
My number 5 is a card. I don't even know how I'm going to use it yet, but I know I want to use it. And it's Ghostly Dancers. 3 colors, white, 2/5 flyer. So, all right, fine. But when it enters, you get to return enchantment from your graveyard to your hand or unlock a room. So you get 2 really good abilities here. And you're already we've already talked about various enchantments you can play, so that can be a thing all its own. But then it does have the eerie ability that when you play another enchantment or unlock a room, you also get a 3/1 spirit creature with flying. So much is going on with this card. Like 5 mana, totally reasonable. We know that's pretty easy to hit. Like we already know enchantment decks can be a thing. I don't even know if we need rooms to be a thing. We could just be playing 1 or 2 of them that make sense, and they still count as enchantments when you cast them. So it's just like, there's not really. I mean, hell, even 5 toughness is reasonable in this card, so you don't just lose it to a bunch of things. Like this card is well costed. It's an evasive creature. It gives you more value. If you survive 1 turn with this, you probably play an enchantment that either makes a body or gets rid of the thing. Now you have an additional body of your own, and now you're back on the aggressive side of things. Like this card, like I would assume in limited, if this lasts for 2 turns, you're probably losing.
I was about to say this, like, I like Valgavoth's Onslaught, don't get me wrong, particularly like freaking out, realizing how good it is. This to me is the unbeatable limited card. This card is bananas. This card is crazy. We've already talked about rooms, and the other half of those other side of those rooms are nuts. If you were to play this and you've been drawing extra cards with that Phyrexian Arena thing, and then you get a demon for free and also a 3/1 white flyer for free, like, there's value on it. It freaks me out how much value is here. There's a reason that's a 2 right there, but it's actually kind of a 5/6 like fat Modi for your 5 mana, but it's also doing this other stuff, and it's unlocking the stuff and triggering everything. This card does it all. I call it one of the cards when we went over during the week for previews, and I'm glad you included it here.
Yeah. By the way it's worded, you can actually play it. You unlock that room, get your demon. But because you unlocked a room, you also get a 3/1 spirit.
Yes.
Bruh.
Yeah.
Unlocking the room gets you the eerie payoff immediately.
Yeah. It's pretty silly.
It's incredible. This card is unbelievable, and I love it. And if there's like a rooms deck, I feel like this is it because this is the discounter. This gets that 8-mana room trigger. Nope, cool. What if you were to bring back a couple ghostly dancers? You know what I mean? I'd be okay with that. That'd be ridiculous.
Oh, that would be silly.
I'm just saying. The Christmas land is very magical.
I mean, they go together. They go together real good.
They sure do. Let's move on here to number 4. My number 4 is a card that I've spoke about on the podcast previously. I still think it's bananas, and I haven't really seen anything that says it's completely unplayable or unreasonable or whatever, because my number 4 is Kona Rescue Beasti. There are beasties, I think, in every color. And this is the green one. It's a green 3 generic mana for a 4/3 rare legendary beast survivor, which means it has survival. At the beginning of your second main phase, if it's tapped, you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. Permanent card. An omniscience, a giant whatever, a huge enchantment thing, a door or whatever, or a room rather. You can just go completely hog wild with whatever you want to put down, and you don't necessarily have to attack. This can trigger the instant you put it onto the battlefield, something taps it, you saddle something, your Tyvar's tapping for it or whatever, and then you get whatever permanent you want. And omniscience is coming in Foundations. And someone's going to try it. You can't not try it. But again, if I just drop like a Valdevoth or whatever, let's go. This card seems ridiculous. Just crazy.
I agree. It was my number 7.
Nice.
Right? So what I will say about the card is the only real, even if you want to call it downside to this card, is just figuring out what the structure of the deck needs to look like. So how many high-end things are you getting the value off of, right? That's really it. It's the same issue we kind of had with the infamous Cruel Claw of like trying to figure out like how many big things do I need so it makes sense to discard and get the free thing. That's it. Otherwise, you have a sizable creature, a 4/3 for 4, that's easy to cast, and maybe you don't get Magic Christmas Land, but what if you just get another 4/4? What if you get a 3/3 with an ability for free, just because, right? Because you decided to crew a vehicle or saddle a mount or tap to a Tyvar or whatever, right? Like there's a bunch of ways you can do it that aren't really even stressing your deck building out to be able to trigger this.
Yeah, not hard to make this guy work. The 3 toughness for me is what holds it back a little bit, but the ceiling is so high on this card that if they don't have an instant speed removal spell, you're facing down an immediate Vaultborn Tyrant or Atraxa or Omniscience or whatever else that isn't even in standard.
A Portal to Phyrexia, right? Like,
sure,
whatever you want to do, but like, this is one of those, like, I hope you have a removal spell or this is going to end badly for you.
I want to get me a 4-mana Tyrannix Rex. That's what I want.
Look, man, the sky and the limit are right here together. I love it. I love that they pushed this to be absolutely would never have had 3 toughness 6 years ago, 7 years ago, maybe. It would have been a 4/2 or even a 4/1, right? Anything kills it because it's so scary. Well, it's still scary, and I think they've got enough removal in the format that they're confident that it reads great. And a lot of cards read great, and it might not get there, but man, the possibilities right now before the set comes out are wide, which is fantastic. Moving into Ruben's number 4, what you got?
This is the final 2/3 for 2 mana on my list. We had a good run, but we did have a bunch of them, so I'm excited about that. And this one, like I said earlier, as it was pertaining to the Generous Visitor 2.0, this is Jukai Naturalist 2.0. Immediately after playing your turn 1 Optimistic Scavenger, you get to play a turn 2 Inquisitive Glimmer, and that's crazy. That's a ridiculous curve. Inquisitive Glimmer is a white and a blue for a 2/3, 2 mana for a 2/3 in white blue.
Who knew?
Enchantment creature Fox Glimmer. It has 2 static abilities. Enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast, and unlock costs you pay 1 less to activate. So 95% of the time, that's going to be letting you play a 4-drop enchantment on turn 3. There's plenty of creatures that are enchantments. There's plenty of, big effects that you want to be getting down a turn earlier. Effectively a mana dork. It tangles real well as a 2/3, much less a 3/4 if you're able to put a +1/+1 counter on it immediately. This card's great.
Yeah, there's nothing to complain about on this card. Like, I mean, It's also another way to shrink the cost of your doors, which is really nice.
Right.
So that's something because we don't have a ton of those, so it's really nice to get this. And there's probably some number of doors rooms you want to play already in that deck because they also count as enchantments.
Yeah.
We already talked about there's a bunch of simple auras you can put on things. There's a bunch of enchantment creatures that are already well costed, but you can literally play the 1/1, play the Glimmer, and then play the other enduring one that lets you draw cards when you hit your opponent, like of enduring curiosity.
Enduring
Right?
curiosity.
Like
Yeah.
that's a silly start to the game.
It's crazy. The fact that, like, when you play a room, you get the discount coming and going. You get the discount to play the thing, you get a discount to untap or unlock rather the other side of it, like, which is fantastic. I mean, your Ghostly Dancers deck starts here. 4 Inquisitive Glimmers, probably 4 Optimistic Scavengers,
Yeah,
and
Yeah.
probably.
whatever rooms give you the most value, and we go to town and see what we can go from there.
Yeah. I mean,
Cards
I
are
have a
crazy.
type, and my type is cards that are obviously good, that have been good in the past, that offer something new. And this offers a whole third toughness. And this offers cheaper unlock costs. Like I there's nothing that you could be asking for more.
There you go. Power Dragon, what's number 4?
My number 4 is another way we can tap things, folks. It's Enduring Vitality. Colorless green for a 3/3 Elk Glimmer that happens to be an enchantment with vigilance, and all your creatures gain the ability to tap for any color. And then when it dies, like all the other enduring things, it just comes back as an enchantment. Like, what I'm thinking about this card is the type of turns and things you can do. Like, once this is on the board, like, you kind of unlock any mana cost you want, right? If you want to ramp and do big, silly things, if we want to play Kona in this deck and have a reason to tap it to get other free things, well, now you have Kona that can get you the free thing, or your Enduring Vitality is going to make it easier for you to just cast your free things. So it's not that hard to Magic Christmas Land a Tyrannix Rex on turn 4 or 5, right? Like that becomes a real thing that could happen. Like this card is very silly. Like I'm into it. Like, extra mana, let me do crazy things. Hell, even play this and then the following turn, play your Smuggler Surprise into something silly, right? Like, there's all kinds of things we could do with this. I'm here for it for sure.
Well, look, just looking up ways to get rid of these stupid things. Troublemaker Oof from Wilds of Eldraine, if you bargain. Shoot Down for 3 mana as a sorcery, and Brothers War. Tear Asunder from Dominaria United. We'll get rid of that stuff. And Haywire Might can do it after they come back. And Early Winter can make them do it, which is cool, but they're probably playing a lot of other enchantments. And so, and Archdruid's Charm is a nice, clear way to get rid of these, because I think you are going to get to the point where you start looking for, like, hey, can I stop dealing with these stupid enduring creatures because they're really annoying? And that's ways to do that.
Yeah, because just getting rid of it the first time is actually not helpful.
Not really.
Scarier on the backside. We also have Exercise in the new set. That exiles a creature with power 4 or greater, or an artifact, or an enchantment. I don't know if if you said that, I missed it. There's not a ton of ways to deal with these guys, which makes them very sticky. And this one in particular, being a survivor outlet, is a huge deal.
I think what I like about the enduring cards is they're likely to appear in many cases in more mid-rangey type decks because of their costs and like you're trying to utilize the ability. But you're not punished to be able to say, okay, I'm going to play this. I need to block something to protect my life total, but then I still get the ability I want off this after the fact. I think that's one of the big things that's going to make these playable.
Yeah, let's move on here to number 3. My number 3 is my Overlord pick. I think this card is fantastic. And it's also a card. This was cards that I really enjoy because I saw so many people immediately go, "This card is unplayable trash. How in the world would you ever? Why would you even play? Why is this thing mythic? This is ridiculous." Because it is Overlord of the Bale Merc. For 2 black and 3 generic mana, it's a 5/5 mythic enchantment creature avatar horror with impending 5. of a black and generic mana, so you can cast it for its impending cost, enters with 5 time counters, isn't a creature until the last is removed. At the beginning of your end step, you remove a time counter from it. Great. Whenever it enters or attacks, you mill 4 cards, and then you may return a non-avatar creature card or a planeswalker card from your graveyard to your hand. So it's got that value, and then once you get that value, and once you get milling cards in your I want to mill cards deck anyway, 4 or 5 turns down the way, oh, oops, random 5/5 that now gets me stuff back with every single swing. And while you're doing that, and they're trying to, they're trying to wrath, or they're trying to, split up or whatever, they're trying to kill your creatures. And then this one just comes in out of nowhere as a giant monster that, again, mills cards and gets more card advantage over and over. I think this card is awesome.
Yeah. This one is the cheapest to impending and tied for the cheapest to actually cast.
Mm-hmm.
And both are good and both are above rate. 5 mana, 5/5, as well as start filling your graveyard as early as turn 2.
When you tell me people think this card's trash, that just brings up that the saying that opinions are like rear ends.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of what I feel like. Because how can you look at this card and not think it's at least playable? And I'm not even saying it has to be top tier, but like you can't look at this and say that like I can't find a use for this, right? I want to build my graveyard for Delirium. I want to play a Insidious Roots deck, right? Like I'm playing some type of Reanimator thing. I need to get some big things into my graveyard, right? Oh, I just need to cast a 5/5 that's going to get me a creature back, so I don't even care if it dies. Like, I mean, like you can't, if you want to make an argument, maybe that you have to decide if it's worth playing this over playing like Aclazotz maybe in your deck, but that's it. That's the only real argument here. Otherwise, the card's just solid.
Yeah.
Like, I have a feeling that there is an avatar creature coming up in a future set that is like bananas, because you can get Atraxa back with this. Like, Atraxa is not an avatar.
They didn't want you to cycle them together. They didn't want you to be able to get another copy of this off of itself. Fair. Like, that's about it.
That's fair. And the other ones are avatars too, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you don't get too much of those shenanigans. So there you go. But either way, I love this card. I love what it does. I love how it comes in later and like, oh, free 5/5. I forgot this awesome effect, and that's terrific. Ruben, what's number 3?
My number 3 is another X spell. This is might be a record for me. I'm not sure I've ever had multiple X spells. This one's another limited bomb. This one's a mythic though, so you'll not see it nearly as often. And I did the math on this card, #done the math, and I was just like, this is just a one-sided wrath most of the time. And it is the Roller Crusher Ride.
Yeah.
The Roller Crusher Ride is X, 2 generic and a red for a legendary enchantment with Delirium. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player while there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, it deals double that damage instead. So we've got a City on Fire effect, right? Furnace of Wrath, double the damage. Great. When it enters, it deals X damage to each of up to X target creatures, which means if X is 3, we're dealing 6 to 3 target creatures. That is wrathing your opponent's board. It's 1 card that can just sit in your hand forever until you end your opponent's whole day with it.
Yeah, the thing about this card that I think initially gave me pause, I'm like, okay, what decks am I playing this in that I'm going to be able to like reasonably get to Delirium? But then the more I thought about it, I said, well, what if I never get to Delirium? And this is just like a 5 mana, get rid of a couple things. Like, all right. And then it just scales up from there. I'm okay with that, right?
Like, it's a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1 by definition.
I'm like, what if I'm playing it in some just big red deck alongside like Koth and Dragons and other things? Like, this is a totally reasonable card to have in there. Like,
that's what I was thinking.
I'm into it.
Right, this is the big red deck card. Like, it's like it's limited bomb. Absolutely, high five your neighbor if you get this in sealed or whatever. But like, to me, this is play the big red deck. It gives you a sort of a end game to work towards, and give you something to put all your mana into. Like, you got all those forests or those mountains rather, put them to work. Whee! I don't know how roller coastery crushery it is in terms of flavor, but sure, I guess. Power Dragon, what's number 3?
Number 3 is a card I'm just going to get tired of seeing. We always have some version of this in standard, it seems like. We didn't have one for a minute that people played, but now we got it. An unidentified hover ship. Colorless white, 3 mana, 2/2. It's a vehicle. It has flying. When it enters, you get to exile something with toughness 5 or less, and it stays gone until this card leaves. But then you actually don't get the card back. They get to manifest dread instead. So it is a little better than some of the other things we get in the past, because usually you're worried about it dying and just giving them the threat back. Now they 50-50 shot them. Maybe they get something reasonable or don't. Like, I'm okay with that. It has a really cheap crew cost of just 1. So vehicles can hop in this thing, which is cool. Or vehicles tokens can hop in this thing. And honestly, I think this is going to get played a lot, especially when you're talking about you want another thing to tap your survivalist to, if you want something that's removal but still stay aggressive. Like, this allows you to do that. Like, there's a lot of decks this card's going to show up in. I feel we're going to get tired of seeing this 3 years from now, but the card's good.
This is one of the best rares of the set. This might be the best rare of the set, honestly, in that it gets rid of Sholdred. Sholdred go home. Sholdred can't come back because you had a piece of removal for the artifact. No. And all of your survivors can use it. I was over here screaming about Kona. This is the perfect turn 3 to turn 4 Kona play. Like, that's where you want to be. Get rid of their scariest thing, play your thing, play your crazy permanent, and then say go with all this advantage. Like, there's a reason, like, the rate is pretty bad. It is a Windrake that you paid full price for and had to crew to get it. But the Windrake part is, it's bonus. It's fringe benefits. You're not playing it for that reason.
It's also a Windrake that survives a split up. And can't be targeted by sorcery speed removal spell like Chainsaw. It's got that Thief of Existence, Thought Not Seer thing going on, where you steal your opponent's best thing and then they don't get it back. And that's a huge barrier in my mind to be like, oh, it's not a Banisher Priest, right? They don't get the thing back as soon as they kill it. No. They get something face down. Who cares, right? Maybe it's a Sheoldred, but now they've got to do a bunch more work to get it back. I also like how evocative this is, because it has to be small enough for you to use the tractor beam to get it into the ship. And then when you return changed after you've been abducted by the aliens. I will also die mad that Nope wasn't nominated for Best Sound at the Oscars. That movie had some of the best sound I've ever heard in any movie ever, and the fact that it wasn't even nominated blows my mind.
I'll die mad that this thing isn't sucking up a cow. Why?
That's true.
It's just not sucking up a cow.
That's fair.
It doesn't have to say. It doesn't say human or whatever anywhere.
Yeah.
It could just be the cow. Could have been right there.
Put cow in the art. Yeah. That's true.
Right. But either way,
especially since we just did some cow puns in Thunder Junction. I mean, it could have been real easy to put one here.
Right. I mean, I feel like this could have said it when it leaves the battlefield. If the exiled card's owner draws a card, and we still would be over going, "This thing's great. It's awesome." It's just
for sure.
Weird Eldrazi-esque ability, but instead it does the manifest register, whatever. Get a 2/2. In the meantime, I'm turning on all of my survivors. I'm getting in the red zone. You're not being able to split it up. You can't sorcerer speed removal it. Like, card is horrific, and it's not legendary. Like, come on.
Nope.
Let's move on here to number 2. Mine is higher, so it's somebody's number 1. If that's okay, because it rules. But Ruben, what's your number 2?
Evan cheated earlier, so I'm gonna cheat now.
Okay.
Evan cheated by having 5 cards at his number 5. I'm cheating by putting a card that isn't really in the set at my number 2. It is, however, the most expensive card that you can open in a pack of Duskmourn. And that's going to be the special guest card, Expropriate. Which is the first time that this card has appeared in a booster pack, other than being on the list, since its original printing in Conspiracy Take the Crown, which was
8 years ago.
8 years ago.
Yeah.
So we desperately needed a reprint of this card, and now we're getting one with some dope new art. Expropriate is 9 mana for a sorcery with Council's Dilemma. Starting with you, each player votes for time or money. For each time vote, you take an extra turn. For each money vote, you choose a permanent owned by the voter, and you gain control of it, and then you exile Expropriate.
Yeah, I hate any card where you get to take extra turns in any game. I just think it's just terrible. I don't like the design. However, on this particular card, we at least get to decide if you get the extra turn or not. Just like, well, you know what? You get my best creature, enchantment, whatever, fine. I'd rather you have that than just go off for like 3 consecutive turns. So sure. But I agree with you. This card needed a reprint. It had slowly been climbing up. I think it to like near $40 at one
Yeah.
point. And like, people, it's gotten to the point where people weren't playing it just because they couldn't afford it. So now that it's going to probably be able to pick one up, I imagine for like 10 to 15 bucks, like much more reasonable for people who are looking for one.
Look, all I'm saying is that this card is really interesting and cool. But then you look at the artwork on the new version and you look at that guy's hand on the right hand side. And when you
Hmm.
see that the coin is coming out of the skin, it's
Oh.
just a level of
Yep.
uncomfortableness. All of a sudden. I was like, oh, coin sand. That's kind of cute. I was like, I don't need coins coming out of the skin. Thank you.
Mhm.
The horror element does still exist. Power Dragon, what's your number 2?
My number 2 is a card that I think might be more playable in older formats, which is why I put it on the list. Because I have a lot of stuff for Commander and Standard a lot of the time. But Unwanted Remake. Just
Hmm.
1 white, instant, destroy target creature, its controller, manifest dread. Not a lot of text on this card, but it doesn't need it. It's an instant, it's a 1 mana removal for a thing. If we are worried about those crazy aggressive red decks in Standard, maybe this is an option people might want to consider. It's just 1 mana, so it gives really good interplay there. But it also does have the ability to let you get rid of your own thing to manifest red, potentially, right? So it's not that bad if you just need to replace a bad creature with something else, or maybe dig for an answer. Like it's got some corner case uses, and I don't know where it's going to end up yet because we have a lot, even in just Standard, we have a lot of really good removal right now. So I don't know where this fits, but if you do need a cheap removal answer, this could be the thing. We'll see.
It's going to be
But
great
now we
value.
have 3 1 mana instant speed things that you can play to remove stuff in older formats.
I'm happy about that. I don't think we actually explain what Manifest Dread did. Manifest Dread says that player looks at the top 2 cards of their library, then puts one on the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature and the other into their graveyard. If it's a creature card, it can be turned face up anytime for its mana cost. So you are potentially giving them a creature back. You're potentially, you're always going to give them a creature, but you're potentially giving them like a real creature or just a 2/2. And I'm okay with that. And sometimes you don't want to fill their graveyard, but that's okay. But 1 mana removal spells, they got to have some pretty serious drawbacks for you to go like, no thanks. I'm not going to spend 1 mana to kill whatever the
Exactly.
scariest thing is you have. Like, Nice Attracts, I get a 2/2. Shoulder, get a 2/2. Like, all these things I'm okay with. I think the main issue is that things return from the graveyard pretty easily these days, and that makes it a little bit worse.
Sure. Historically, this card has seen play, regardless of whether it's the best one that's ever been printed. We don't have Path to Exile in Standard. We don't have Swords to Plowshares. This is the only 1 mana option we have. So would you rather pay 1 mana for this or 2 mana for Get Lost, for example? I think that there's going to be some decks that would rather have the Declaration in Stone effect of giving your opponent something worse, and then 1 mana is going to be better for I think most decks, right? Where you don't really mind if your opponent has a 2/2. Swan Song, Generous Gift, Beast Within effects are always popular, especially in Commander, and this is another one.
I'm kind of curious to see, because I think we can all accept that just like Swords of Plowshare is still the best one, right? Just exile, you give them a few points of life, whatever. But then it's like, are there situations where you would rather give them random 2/2 versus giving them a mana from Path to Exile?
For sure.
Right? Like I don't know what decks that's going to matter for or not, but I think it's an interesting conversation to have.
And as as the years roll on, as we continue to get more 1 mana removal spells, because they're going to keep making them in forms and fashions, we'll get to be able to kind of do that kind of dance of, well, they'll get a mana, or maybe they'll just get a 2/2, or maybe I don't care, or maybe it triggers this in a certain way, or maybe it's really great because I can target my own creatures and it doesn't make me look silly or whatever, Yeah, fantastic card. That's very versatile. That said, let's move on here to our number 1. Oh my goodness. And I can't wait to see what someone picked as my number 2, because again, that card's great. But I'll go ahead and drop my number 1. This card is very scary. This card is very scary. It was meant to be scary. It was supposed to be scary. And if it wasn't scary as hell, honestly, they dropped the ball. And they did not drop the ball on Valgavoth Terror Eater. This is the flagship mythic for the set, and I think we can all sort of tell why. This is one of the cards that for the next few years, you're going to have to ask yourself, do I want to reanimate this or anything else? Because you can get back in Atraxa, you can get back, Shouldered and whatever. But, Valgavoth is pretty ridiculous as a 3 black, 6 generic mana, 9 mana, 9/9. Mythic, legendary, elder demon with flying and lifelink. So a 9 mana, 9/9 flying lifelink, ward of sacrifice, 3 non-land permanents. Just living the dream, everybody. If a card you didn't control will be put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. During your turn, you may play cards exile with Valgavoth. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana value rather than pay its mana cost. You play this, you get this thing into play in some weird way, because you're not paying 9 mana for it, but you get this in play, you destroy their whatever, and then you pay life equal to that mana cost, and you get that whatever. Is just incredible. Like, it turns everything into Phyrexian Mana-esque in that way. It's a giant lifelinker. They have to have 3 non-land permanents available to even target this thing. This card was priced to be insane, and it is quite insane.
Yeah, the only thing that's going to affect this card is just what does the metagame look like? Because if it's not decks that are making tokens or loading up on enchantments that they could sacrifice, like, this could be rough. I mean, having to get rid of 3 things is a real downside. Because, I mean, you're talking minimum, it's going to be a 4-to-1 situation.
Right.
And
also, lifelink is unbeatable against some decks that are just not even going to be able to kill it. The fact that it can stand on defense, like you said, it's another, like, am I reanimating anything else or am I reanimating this? Very similar to Atraxa. I think that those are probably the 2 that you're going to put in every reanimator style deck from here until they cycle.
Yeah, this to me is the threat that you want. This is the threat I want them to have to deal with. Like, the ward just seems just bananas. As they were like, ward 4 is like it's a bridge too far and all this stuff. And Vein Ripper has a serious problem because you got to sack a creature or whatever. And they come out with this thing and I'm like, mother of God, that's a scary ward.
They might as well just say hexproof.
Maybe, yeah.
But
seriously.
you know what? It makes you work for it, and that's okay.
It gives you an option, which is, I think, what they want. But my lord, you're going to pay for it. Power Dragon, what's number 1?
My number 1 was probably your number 2, but it's Screaming Nemesis.
No.
2 colors. Oh, it wasn't.
Number
2 colors
6.
and a red. Nice.
Yeah.
A 3/3 with haste. And the ability is just nuts. Whenever it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to any other target. If a player's dealt damage this way, they can't gain life for the rest of the game. Like, and I'm going to admit, when I first saw this, I'm like, okay, this seems pretty good. But then I started deck building and started thinking about ideas. And then I started thinking about defending against it. And then I started just getting this growing hate towards the cards. Because I'm like, this thing's dumb. Like,
very good.
I can't block it with anything because it's just going to trade at worst. I block it with a 6/6. All right, fine. It just kills the 6/6 if they want to. Right. Or it blocks and then just still hits me for 6, which is super annoying. Like, keeps you from gaining life. Obviously, we talked about a lot of ways to gain life already in our top 10s. So it turns all that off. It's a haste creature that's good to have after a sweeper if you want that. Like, it just does so much for 3 mana. Like, honestly, if I was playing a red deck, I'd almost rather have this than the Layline. Honestly, this card is so silly.
In a traditional red deck, absolutely. And this card does not ask anything of you. It has the lowest possible commitment that you could want. Much less if you're able to, like, trigger it before the creature leaves play. There's a new 2-drop in the set called Razorkin Needlehead that says that when an opponent draws a card, Razorkin Needlehead deals 1 damage to them. If you're able to deal 1 damage to, like, your 3/3 on the way over, that is just a 2/3 curve that no one's ever going to be able to stop. So this and 3/3 haste is a great Wrath follow-up. It's great on turn 3. It's great on turn 10.
The other thing that's cool about it is, like, if you have it to block, your opponents don't even want to attack necessarily because they might lose 2 or 3 things in that combat step.
Yep.
Yeah, when you look back and you look at 3 mana 3/3s that are just like straight up 3 mana 3/3s, Hulking Bugbear, for example, was in the D&D set, but it was 2 red and a generic mana. Godric in Woe was 2 red and a generic mana. And so, like, to get it kind of like sort of free, you had from Murders on Karlov Manor, there was Krinko, Baron of 10th Street, but that's a legend, so you can't play multiple of them. This card just asks the absolute least amount of possible investment. It's $25 for the cheapest copy right now. This card is ridiculous. Like, Mono Red was already a good deck. It was already a well-played, well-traversed deck that has plenty of very powerful lines to play with. And now this stupid thing, which punishes you for playing giant fatties, because they can literally just put this thing on defense, and you don't want to take that kind of damage to redirect to you. B, it shuts down all your life gain. If that life gain stuff goes crazy, this is just going to see even more play. Like, this to me looks like the bane of best of one in Arena, because it's all you're going to be playing against is this stupid card for like the next 2 or 3 months. I have a feeling whatever's in the Death Ray set, or even Foundation, is going to have something that just shuts this thing down hard. Like, straight up shuts it down hard, because I don't foresee us having this type of sort of power level in a red card for that long.
Oh, it's crazy. Like, you like lightning strikes, Helix, just like, all right, cool, you're still taking 3. Like, whatever, like, you killed my dude, fine.
I just,
it's Doomblade or nothing.
Yeah.
It's
this card
it's unwanted remake
annoying.
or nothing.
Yeah, this is a good example of you want, creature removal that doesn't deal damage.
This is even a problem in Commander, because I can go attack Ruben and then just make sure that Evan can't gain life the rest of the game.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's a very political card too.
It's incredibly political. It's incredibly pushed, and it is just crazy, crazy good and crazy expensive as a result. That said, Ruben picked my number 2 as his number 1. This card is bananas. Ruben, tell us what it is.
It's Force of Will. Did you know that they printed Force of Will in this set?
They did.
They printed a free counterspell in this set. It comes attached to a 3/4 double striker if you're interested in that. And it's the Wandering Rescuer. 3 generic white for a legendary creature, Human Samurai Noble. It's a 3/4 with flash and convoke. Your creatures can help cast it. They'll pay for either 1 mana of the white or 1 mana of the generic. It has double strike, and it has a magical sentence that says other tapped creatures you control have hexproof. So there's a whole lot of interplay going on with this card. First of all, it's just an Avacyn, right? It's an Archangel Avacyn. You play it mid-combat, and you block favorably, and it's a blowout. It's also able to tap your creatures for their survival, or for for whatever other reason, including the ability on this card. Your opponent tries to Doomblade you. Odd rats. My opponent's going to kill my best creature. Not so fast. The Wandering Rescuer is here to wander in and rescue, tapping that creature down and giving it hexproof. All of your creatures hexproof for the turn. And it's a 3/4 double striker. So it swings back on the back end for 6 at the very least. This card's absurd. It's well worth the 5 mana. It's also another 5-cost white creature with Convoke for the Boros Convoke decks in Explorer and other formats. Just a very good card.
Yeah.
I love that it has flash, honestly, more than anything else. Like, because there are some times where you get in these weird situations playing the aggro decks where you don't want to overcommit to the board because, Sunfall or whatever is just like looming. So now you can kind of go, you know what? Go ahead. I'm just going to attack with these couple things and we'll just wait and see what happens. And then if you do, great. You're going to be taking 6 next turn. If not, whatever. Then I just got a bigger creature and come in next turn. Right? Like, I love the spot that it fills. It gives those aggro decks just a little more reach in some problematic matchups. And just the bonus of being able to protect a creature is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that card, I mean, it's my number 2 for a reason. I think this card is just absolutely absurd. I felt like Valgavoth was just a little bit sort of more over the top. This is more kind of surgical, but still crazy, crazy good. Like, there's a reason this is one of the first cards they told you about the set, because they're like, hey, we want you to like get really excited about this set because it's like crazy fantastic. And like, yeah, it's crazy fantastic. You counterspell their removal spell. Like, at this point, every time you want to kill something in a deck that has white mana in it, you need to start counting. Like, oh, they got 3 lands on tap, but also 2 creatures. I can't use this right now, or I'm going to get completely blown out. And as a result, it's going to change how you play. You can, act like you have it or don't have it or whatever. And just a EOT, 3 lands, 2 creatures, make a 3/4 double strike is fantastic. Like, that rate is sick. And It's maybe not as sick as Screaming Nemesis sick, but it's still really good.
Yeah.
And I'll take it. The card is absolutely fantastic. And so, yeah, with that said, that is all of our top 10 Duskmourn cards. I'll get them on screen here in just a second so you guys can take a look at it. But do appreciate you guys watching. And be sure to tell us what your honorable mention is in the comments, because we want to know what those are. Go ahead and pull this up ASAP. All right, cool. All right, so now you can see them right now on your screen. Take a look at what I've got, what Ruben has, Power Dragon's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what we did not select, as I just mentioned. Before we go, I want to thank our two co-hosts. Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you. I'm excited for this set. Not my genre wheelhouse, but really evocative cards, really fun story that comes through in the cards. They seem to have really taken good care to translate the tropes and the iconography into the set. It's a home run. It's another home run.
Thank you, Power Dragon.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I'm sort of more looking forward to death racing than I am running through a haunted house, but they made a lot of sweet cards to play with. So yeah, deck building's already been really fun using the new cards.
Yeah, I think they did a great job making cards that were really interesting and evocative from the top down. I think I had a whole nother list of my top 10 sort of flavorful cards that were in the set, because I thought they did a really fantastic job with stuff like Chainsaw that we talked about and Killer's Mask and whatnot that we didn't even get to. And I think that is quite fantastic. And we appreciate you guys for watching. Please follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at twitch.tv at Magic Mike's, on Twitter or TikTok at Magic Mike's Cast, our Magic Mike's subreddit, and like the Magic Mike's page on Facebook, or join us here next week, same time, same place, for some Baldur's Gate 3 gameplay, and for the next set release for another episode of Top 10 Magic Mike's. Good night, everybody.